Hi, today I want to speak to you about how couples seem to struggle almost to the point where they're speaking two different languages, and that is why they're not understanding each other. So let's sort of disarm a little bit of the blame game that often goes on between couples in terms of, just sort of, you don't get me, you don't listen to me, et cetera, et cetera. Because you know what? It's always takes two. So, if you're new here, my name's Luella, and I'm a Catholic psychotherapist who tries to help couples stay together and stay committed. But yeah, back to the topic. If you've ever walked into a conversation with your spouse and felt like you were speaking Greek and the other person was somewhat alien, you know, of a different planet, then this video is going to be for you. But let's start with some reassurance. First of all, you're not broken and your spouse isn't broken either. But your communication might be a little bit bruised. And here's why. What feels like emotional distance, cold shoulders, short tempers, or suffocating silence sometimes is often not a character flaw. It's just a missing skill. And yeah, we're going to unpack that a little bit today. So, yeah, I also want to sort of bust the communication myth because especially for someone like me who hears it all the time for couples, you just need better communication skills. I mean, I hear it all the time. But what does that really even mean? It's like when you think about it, it's like telling someone to breathe better or walk differently. Like, you have a certain gait and it's pretty hard to change that gait, or it's pretty hard to learn a new language, you know, from one session to the next. So, yeah, it's, and especially, sometimes you just feel like you're suffocating and you just, and someone's telling you to breathe better. Like the issue is not effort. I know my couples really, really try hard. It's more of the environment. So let me explain that. What we really need isn't more talking, it's more about translation. And this is where we get into the two different languages. Because in most Christian marriages, we're not fighting. We're just sort of speaking, yeah, two different languages, assuming the other one's completely fluent in the language you're speaking. So let's just talk first of all about the woman's language, okay? Her language is connection. And maybe if I paint a picture, you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's say a woman walks into a room and starts visiting. Um, she's not telling a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. She's feeling her way through her thoughts. And within all that, she's looping in sort of some side comments or other feelings, and maybe even what her sister did last week, because something just popped into her brain. To her, it all makes perfect sense. But to her husband, it's like being dropped in the middle of a novel, without any idea of the who the characters are or the title of the book or whatever. He's completely confused. But she's hurt now because he's like not connected with her, but the truth is they're both really trying. I think, we got to give couples a little bit more credit, I think sometimes. I think, I mean, it's not only the couples that come to me, like obviously they want to change something because they're in the room with me, but I think most couples really do try. And now let's talk a little bit about a man's language, which is clarity and fixing. Now, let's flip it. Okay, so he comes home, he sees his wife eyes look a little, I don't know, disturbed or irritated, dimmer, you know, and asks, like, is everything okay? And she says, I'm fine. I'm fine. So then he believes her, seems logical. But later that night, boom, you know, she's upset. He didn't ask deeper questions. And he's kind of like completely confused because in his mind, he did ask. So what went wrong? Well, um, obviously, when she said, you know, nothing was wrong, she clearly meant, I don't have the energy to even explain it to you right now, but I'm hurting and yeah, please ask more questions. Okay, guys, remember that. When she says nothing, it's never nothing. And that's her language, you know. But he didn't have the translation, he didn't have that dictionary handy. So, um, you know, we have to also, I mean, I've read books. I think I've read the books I'm reading now are much more enlightening than some of these other books I've read in the past. But you know, I'm not. What's the word? What's the word? Okay, pause. Minimalizing. I'm not minimalizing self-help books. They can be very helpful, but you know, I think a lot of the times, especially for women, they read these books like some sort of relationship book. And she highlights the good parts, you know, folds the corners of the page, and then casually leaves it out, you know, for her husband to discover, um, you know, whether that's on his bedside table or right on his desk or in the kitchen. But what she's really doing, you know, what is this woman doing? She's basically communicating, hoping, you know, praying that he'll read it and understand her better. But you got to understand it from his perspective, right? What does he see? He sees this more like an ambush, you know, like a trap, a booby trap in paperback form, right? Because to him, that book says, you're broken. It's your problem. You need to fix this. You're not enough. I'm not happy. You know, like, why would any logical man pick that up and start reading it? You know, think of it, women. Would you, if he left a bunch of books around the house? I mean, you know that you're opening up like a trap. So stop doing that. Okay. Like, we gotta get down to the real, you know, bones of this issue. Um, it's basically, you know, different intentions. You want to fix him and he wants to fix you, but you got to see it as having the same desire, which is lovely. Okay. Um, Men speak in a way to offer solutions, and women speak to feel seen. And before I go any further, let me just little caveat here. I I said this to a couple just a couple days ago, and like she kind of goes, actually, it's the opposite for us. And hey, many times in my marriage, it's the same way. So I get that, right? We're all very individualistic, and I think it all boils down to how much on the spectrum of femininity and masculinity are you? You know, I mean, I can be much more in my masculine sexuality at times, and then I swing back to the feminine, and it's all good. But you know, um, it's same for men. So anyway, it's just sort of a broad statement, but I think it's the truth. Um, you know, if she's saying, I had such a hard day, he replies, well, maybe tomorrow you should leave earlier to avoid traffic. Now she's really irritated. He's confused. Like, what just happened? I think many times men are walking around dazed and confused in a marriage. But anyway, hopefully this video will help you a little bit with that. Because in his mind, he offered a solution his way, which is his way of loving her, but what she wanted was just his presence, really, not a plan. And just like when I say I'm reading better books now, one of them I must say is the Bible. And a website I absolutely love is Vatican dot, what is it, dot VA? But anyway, lots of great things to read there, guys. But in James 1:19, he states, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger, you know? But most of us reverse that, and that's the real problem, guys. So, you got to see it again, like be kind to one another. Like misinterpretation is usually almost always the problem and not spitefulness or malice, and to give you some hope, like here's the thing, like 99% of the time your spouse is not trying to hurt you. I truly believe that. I don't, they would need to be a psychopath if that was the truth. And no, women, don't say he is. Let's just hear me out. And men too. They're actually trying to help you in the only language they know. So maybe, ask yourself, like, what are they really trying to say? If it feels harsh, is it possible that was sort of like kind of clumsy, type of love, you could say? I always tell couples, speak like a jewel. I have such a hard time saying that word. Jeweler, somebody who works with diamonds, jeweler. Not like, you know, yeah, be more like a jeweler and not like a kid with a bunch of gravel in their fists. Okay, you're a grown up now. Place your words in gently. Um, Listen deeply. I'm sorry, having a hard time. Examine them before just tossing them out. Okay. Um, because really, you were never meant to be fluent in each other's language on day one, right? Marriage is not about perfect, like being perfect, having perfect fluency. It's about being committed, um, and being committed to understanding each other, really. Committed in translation, you could say. So, I mean, over time, you get better at reading each other's pauses and silence and tone, and it takes a lot of grace, and there's going to be a lot of dropping those stones, that gravel, or instead of placing them in carefully. But I know that there's love there, and if like you're watching this and realizing how many potholes, your conversations have hit lately, like I want you to really think about this. You're not doomed. You're not in some season of yeah, malice and spite. It's more like just think of it as learning. Be curious with one another. I always say that. Um, Fluency really comes through listening and less talking. Okay. Please see marriage is a sacred space. It's sacred not because it's easy, but because it demands something higher and holy. You know, we can't remember, we can't forget how Thomas Aquinas described love, and that is to will the good of the other, even when you don't understand them, when you don't understand their language. And that kind of love really requires a lot of translation, humility, and patience. So, in summary, the next time your spouse says something that stings, I want you to pause. That's what I do. I've I've started doing that about 6 months, well, probably more a year ago, pausing, feeling the sting, and then instead of reacting, ask yourself, what's the heart behind these words? It's hard. Like sometimes you really think it's done out of spite, but no. So maybe, like just maybe it's more a heart that's trying to say I love you in a language that you haven't heard yet. I know that's strong, um, but I know deep and down they probably do love you very much. So, hey, as always, if this helps you in some way, please share it with someone who might need a little bit of encouragement, when their marriage is suffering right now. And if you want more real talk like this, that's faith-filled and practical and honest, modern, subscribe and stick around because in this little corner of the internet, we're not afraid to fumble here. You know, um, we want to push forward together. Thanks for listening.